Hello and welcome to episode 21 of Northpointe Plus. Northpointe Plus is 21. Northpointe Plus can drink.
I'm glad you said it. Normally I say those things, and anyway.
No, there's another edgy pastor on staff, and we're competing.
Man, you can win it. You can have it. I'm old and tired.
We'll trade the title every now and then.
I like it.
It's a rotating belt.
All right, so that would have only been cool had we had drinks here, like cocktails in front of us. No, that water doesn't. Well, I don't know what's in your water container there, your cup. But anyways, none of this matters. Sorry.
Legally not allowed to say anything.
Let's not drive down that road.
No, let's not. Oh, man, this is our follow-up podcast. So we gather together on Sunday mornings, have our message, get together, talk, and this podcast is a way to continue that.
Yeah, and I said it on Sunday, and I'll say it again. I am glad we do this.
Yeah.
Because the American concept of sermon, not just American, like this is kind of the natural way. It's a monologue, not a dialogue, not the way that Jesus intended conversations to happen. I'm not like down on it. It is what it is. It's who we are. But I love that we're trying to do some things to mitigate that some. So I dig this.
Yeah, no, I think it was great that you brought it up yesterday that Jesus asked so many questions.
Yeah, that's
in his
wild.
Ministry, that he asked 300 something questions, but he was asked like 183.
183.
Like and that's just really cool because everyone falls into the formulaic format of what church looks like, where you meet once a week, have your message, go home, have Sunday lunch. So this is a cool way that we can just continue the conversation. You guys can ask questions, challenge, say Chris is wrong, Chris is right, whatever you might say.
Yeah, and appreciate you guys. It only works if you ask questions. So
so
for
thank
doing
you.
that. Yeah, thanks
for submitting questions. So yesterday, Chris, we're going through Proverbs.
Yeah.
As of recording, we're recording on January 31. So if you're following along with the reading plan, you should have just finished Proverbs, and then
or you will today.
Yeah, you still have time.
Yeah, so
as we're recording.
If you're a husband, you want to read today. Just there's a little tease for you.
Yes, that classic Proverbs 31. And then as we post, this will go live on February 1, so you can start the plan again, go back through Proverbs, see what else God might say to you, because as you go through it again, inevitably something will come up and God will just be like, hey, remember when we read this? I'm going to remind you about it again.
Let's do something fun for a second. I mean, the whole thing's fun, but this is just free for folks who actually watch the podcast. Yeah. If you're a husband and you read Proverbs 31 today, do it before your wife does and send her a text affirming some of the things that you read in there. Man, I hope a lot of husbands are watching this right now. And just be like, baby, I was reading the Bible this morning, and it said, like, a godly woman, a noble woman is this, and you're just spot on. Oh, my gosh.
It's a game changer.
Yeah, we're going to have a lot of,
good communication.
It's good communication, but it's also a win right there because you just got ahead of the game with your wife. I say game, I don't mean it like that, but man, you're ahead of it. That's just anyways, okay. That's free, guys. Try that. Let me know how it works. Text me at markadkins.com. So.
markadkins.com.
Yeah, I mixed like 3 different communication methods there all into one that doesn't work. But
oh, man.
Yeah, if you want to email me, it's madkins@northpointecc.org.
Yes.
So
yeah, it's confusing, but it works out.
Yeah. All right. So yes, we did talk about communication yesterday.
Yes, we did.
Or I did, and Proverbs has a ton to say about it, which is kind of interesting to me. And I asked the question partway through the talk of, are you surprised that so much of what Proverbs says about communication has to do with listening? Because I was surprised by that.
Oh, yeah.
I was looking for, honestly, more tips on communicating well.
Yeah.
And just got captured by the fact that listening was such a big component of that, which probably shouldn't be surprised, but it was
and again, some of that can come down to just our American culture. We like to talk. We like to be the ones to talk.
Yeah.
You're very individual. You're a very individualistic individual. Your opinion matters.
Yeah, well, I'm the most important person in my world.
Yes,
so,
and so you should do whatever it takes to make that opinion known.
Well,
in whatever setting you're in.
It is a crazy thinking. It is very cultural. Yeah. Other cultures, thinking like Latin American cultures, that not the same.
Right.
Like the family is the most important unit, or others are most important. But it's not us.
Not for us. Go America.
Whatever. There's probably some benefit to it.
It is what it is.
Yeah, it is what it is.
It is what it is. And that's why it's good that we're relying on the Bible. We're not relying on the Constitution.
Weird.
Or culture.
Weird.
We go back to Scripture, which
transcends all cultures and all ideologies.
Way to go, God.
Yeah, go figure.
He knew what he was doing.
Almost. I love it. Cool.
So we're talking about communication, the importance of listening. And so we got a lot of questions, which is great.
Good.
Some of these questions at the beginning are less to do with
they're hardballs
communication and
more to do with. Let's do it quick.
We're just going to run through these.
I love it.
Don't cuddle the panda.
Yeah, don't cuddle the panda.
Turned into something we could have never imagined.
Jake needs to write a book. If he wrote a book, I think he could probably retire early.
I was going to say, is it a children's book? That'd be a weird children's book.
Multiple platforms. You get the adult book, you got the children's book, he could have the podcast. It's pretty sweet.
We're basically building Jake's empire.
I love this. As long as I can just say that I know Jake, that's all that matters to me.
There it is. Jake, don't forget us when you're big. So the first question comes in regarding Rick wearing the Panda shirt yesterday.
Yeah.
Rick has his own shirt.
Yeah.
Don't cuddle the Panda.
Yeah.
And it's red. Donna wants to know why it's red.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think the only logical answer is that Rick is a communist.
Wow, that's again, Madkins at northpointecc.org, folks.
So. That's the only logical answer.
Okay.
Are all Ohio State fans also communists because they wear red? I can't say.
Is that an Ohio State color?
These are, I think so.
Is that a football team?
They would say crimson.
Crimson. Crimson.
So would
is that Crimson Tide?
I think so.
Or is that different?
Roll Tide. These are all sports references that people are going to roll their eyes at.
It's really important. I don't know how important it is, but it's probably worth noting that neither Mark nor I are sports people.
At all.
Yeah, so when we talk sports, it's pretty fun.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like the University of Michigan because my family does. And the number of times people will come up and say, "Did you watch the game?" I will just say yes.
Yeah.
It's just easier to say yes.
Yeah,
I don't know what game is on. I don't know what season we're in.
I always like to say, "Oh, girls volleyball." Yeah, I was watching that. some luge. I was watching
acro
luge.
tumbling. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we don't know, Donna.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Rick likes red.
Yeah.
There's that.
Yeah. Our ruble at northpointecc.org. Feel free. Shout out. He'll let you know.
Second question regarding still the Panda. Will there be a second printing of the highly coveted Panda stickers?
No, the Lord works in mysterious ways, so
we'll leave it at that.
That's awesome.
Great.
If there are, they'll be on the Connect kiosk, and you can feel free to grab them.
Whenever they're there. If they're there.
Keep checking.
Next question, a burning theological question. Chris, you mentioned yesterday that you will answer all questions.
Sure.
Will you answer this one?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. That's it. That was the question.
And an answer. No name on that one, huh?
Nope.
Yeah.
Anonymous.
Right.
Rightly so.
Good. Hope they watch.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. Now that we have housekeeping out of the way,
good stuff.
Let's dive into Proverbs.
All right.
So the first question comes from Ray Boyer, and he wants to know, now that you're back on the podcast, because if people remember, you were supposed to be on the podcast at the beginning of January.
Yeah.
Chris got sick.
Yeah. Sick.
Yeah.
Right. Yep.
So you weren't there.
No.
And Ray submitted a question to you and was very offended that you couldn't answer.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ray.
Ray wants to know, what's your favorite proverb?
Favorite proverb? I don't know if I have a favorite one, but one that pops to mind all the time, and we've used it probably because we've used it in our home, raising our kids and whatnot. A ton is Proverbs 3, verse 5. Trust in the Lord with all your heart.
Yeah.
In all your ways, acknowledge Him, make your paths straight. And there's some good exegesis that should happen in that because it's one of those proverbs that seems like, oh, cool. If I just
everything will go well.
Trust Jesus, then my life will be amazing. But yeah, it's been for us. It's been a powerful proverb, and even in the times of struggle and frustration and tragedy and all the pieces of life, that key of when we trust the Lord, there is clarity.
Yeah.
In our stuff, even when we don't know what we're supposed to do. So it may not be that kind of clarity.
Right.
I can be clear, and I share this at every funeral that I officiate. It can be clear that God is still sovereign. He still sits on His throne. He still hurts when I hurt, and He cheers when I cheer too. So it's not like just the sad parts of life, but because I have that trust in Him, or as a family, when we put our trust in Him, there is a clarity of reality in the midst of. So maybe that. Great. Proverbs 3, I think it's like 5 and 6, something like that.
Great. Love it. There you go, Ray.
There you
go. This question is from Mark Adkins, ? Which should be a clue that it's not me.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah, not me. So someone is stealing my identity.
With a question mark.
With a question mark. And identity theft is serious.
It's not really stealing your identity. They've just sampled it because they've made it their own by changing
They've appropriated my identity.
Only a little bit. But the question mark changes it. It's its own thing. It's like what Weird Al does with music. We're not sure
if they're taking my identity or not. It's still in question. So it's
okay. Fair enough.
It's in limbo.
All right.
Okay. So a question from Mark Adkins.
Yeah.
How do you get better at being a great question asker and going to ask questions that are helpful, not just surface level questions? So how do you go beyond just, hey, have you seen the weather today?
Yeah, that's a That's a great question. If we were having a sit-down discussion, I would say, give me some ways that you've become or tried to become a good question asker. And maybe they would say something like, well, I ask a bunch of questions. And I would be, cool, what kinds of questions? And they'd say, what do you mean? I'd say, well, are they questions that you can answer with a yes or a no? And they might say, yes. That's a bad question. So, I don't know. I think being a great question asker is a fun way to relate to other people.
Yeah.
And so it almost, I don't want to use the word game, but it becomes kind of a fun game that you can play of I want to get to know this person. I'm going to ask a bunch of questions.
Yep.
And then figure out which ones seem to land well. We always ask the same questions when we meet people, right? Hey, are you married? Do you have kids? What do you do for a living?
Right.
And those are pretty surface level questions, but they're also safe questions to ask. And we want to have some safe questions depending on how we know a person.
Right.
But I stopped asking people what they do for work because I don't want people to ever hinge their identity on their job. And that's part of the first responder world leaking out of me.
Sure.
But I'll ask them, hey, so what do you do with your days? And that's a weird question. And everybody pauses at that and goes, do you mean like what do I do for work? Maybe. Yeah. Tell me about that. Or like, do you have hobbies or like, do you sleep a lot or do you like to read? Or I don't know. Like you tell me, what do you do with your days? So I think finding different ways to ask questions and if you play with that enough with people, you'll find some ones that make people pause.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're in this fairly decent conversation and then you file that away in your Rolodex in the back of your head, and you're like, I'm gonna pull that out again because that's a pretty fun thing. The other, I mean, for whatever it's worth, the other maybe secret is the tell me more about that. That's a simple question that keeps people talking, and most people really do like talking about themselves.
They do.
The
when I was an admissions rep at college, you work a lot with high school students who don't like to talk at all.
They're learning.
They're learning to talk. They're getting there.
Yeah.
So that was the primary audience we interacted with all the time. So we learned and we're trained on, okay, how do you pull students out because they're in an uncomfortable position, they're out of their comfort zone, they're talking to complete strangers about spending thousands of dollars. So, and the trick we learned is that when you ask questions, and maybe this is part of the American culture, we almost feel that we can make it more comfortable for someone if we answer the question while we ask it.
Oh.
So if we say, like, for example, in the context of high school students, what are you wanting to study? Do you want to study business? Do you want to? Are you looking at nursing? And we kind of like provide answers to them as we ask the question, and then they'll say like, oh yes, I'm looking at studying business. And so for me, being a good question asker is stop answering people's questions.
Yeah, I'm like, wait, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Because everything in me is like, don't okay.
Just ask the question, and if it's quiet for a little bit, that's okay. It's okay to be quiet for a little bit, and I love using the prompt. Tell me about yourself.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Yeah.
Because then they can go wherever they want.
Exactly. If they want to feel safe.
Yep.
Well, I'm married. I got 2 kids. Been married 26 years. I work at a church. I work EP. I mean, they can give you safe answers. Or if they, well, I'm really struggling with depression right now, and I don't really know how to dig myself out of that. And they get to set that. I like what you said too about, and I appreciate you saying it. Silence.
Mm-hmm.
We stink at that.
We do not like it.
So awkward for some reason.
Yeah.
And so when I'm coaching group leaders and we're talking through how to ask good questions, one of the things I'll tell them is ask your question and then count to 30. And it is one of the most difficult things, group leaders, because 30 seconds is a long time for silence.
It is.
And somebody will always rescue you. Somebody will always jump up to start that conversation going. So silence is good.
Yeah. Yeah. So the way to be great at asking questions.
Yeah, just do it.
Ask more questions.
Yeah, just do it. Nike had it all figured out, right?
There we go.
Just do it.
Who knew they were talking about communication?
Cool.
That's good. This question comes from the Jarvis Life Group, and it's 2 parts.
It's one of my favorite life groups, by the way. Of all of our life groups, I have a lot of favorites. And Jarvis is one of my top favorites.
They're like children. Not really all your favorite, but there is a secret.
They're all my favorite, but some are more favorite depending on the minute or the day or the moment. And right now, Jarvis Life Group is one of my favorites. So. Yeah, they meet on Sunday afternoons if you're interested in plugging into a life group. I don't care. I'm going to pitch it right now.
Yeah.
We got a bunch of them, but Jarvis Life Group, man, Sunday afternoon right after church.
Works out well.
It's a good deal.
So their life group asks 2 questions.
Yeah.
So we'll split it into 2.
All right.
How do you get the other person on board with the 10 points? So in your message, we talked about 10 points
we did.
For amazing communication.
Yeah.
What if someone has no interest in any of those 10 points.
I'm always nervous when any kind of question or concern or issue starts with, how do you make someone? Because already we're at the answer, which is you don't. You can't make anybody do anything. But I do think you can certainly always do yourself, like work on yourself, model it, become better at whatever the point is that you're most fascinated by. I don't know that I'd go after all 10. That's just, it's too much stuff. Just pick one that you're like, I want to do that a little more. So if it's being a better question asker, like just start at that. And so if, whether it's a life group context or maybe it's a spouse context, just become a great asker of questions if that's the one you're working on in your life group. Yeah. Even if you're not the leader of the life group, you can still ask good questions. Right. So if the life group leader drops one of the questions out of sermon-based questions and someone starts answering that, feel free to be like, hey, wait a minute, help me understand that more, unpack that a little more for me. I'm just trying to catch up. Right. Something like that. Yeah. Or with your spouse, when they get home from work, you're like, hey, what's the most fascinating part of your day? Because again, we always say, how was your day? Good. That's a question that could be answered with good or not good. Right. And maybe you follow that up with, oh, it wasn't good? Right. I'm sorry. Well, that's not even a question. What wasn't good? So ask the question, hey, what was the most fascinating part? Or who was the most interesting person you met today? Or if you could erase 1 minute from your day today, what would it have been? Yeah. Just how do you ask these open-ended, not yes or no answer questions? Yep. Sorry, I devolved back to questions. No, that probably you can't make anybody do anything, but you can certainly model it, and over time they might pick it up.
Yeah, well, and I think that it relates to, you mentioned, or you talked about the concept that Henry Cloud brought up. Yeah. The fool doesn't respond to words. Right. So you can go through that process of, hey, there's these 10 things that we as a life group or we as an employer-employee relationship are working towards. And it will go over their head. It won't matter. Yeah. And so then it comes down to expectations and consequences. Yeah. What we talked about. Yeah, they say deadlines.
Cloud says deadlines and consequences. Yeah. And his book, for whatever it's worth, Necessary Endings, Henry Cloud, he's really writing from a business perspective. So he's writing from the marketplace world of how employers deal with employees. Yep. And so when you say deadlines and consequences, that makes more sense in that context. Right. Hey, buddy, I need you to do this by then, or we're going to have to whatever. That becomes a much more complex reality in social relationships. So it's with your kids, maybe a little bit easier. Hey, clean your room by tonight or I'll do it for you. Which is something we have used. Or with your spouse, that obviously is a much more sensitive, because you don't want to say we're applying deadlines and consequences to our spouse. But I do like your word of expectations, because we can say we can have some expectations. Right. Okay, I really need you to do this by then, or we're going to be homeless.
Yes. Yeah. That to me, in my relationships, whether it be friendships, marriage, whatever it might be, clearly communicating expectations solves so many problems that people might have, where it's like, oh, we were supposed to be home at this time. Oh, well, I didn't know that. Well, now we know that. Now that expectation is set, whether that's for a child, for a roommate, whatever it might be. Yeah. Clearly communicating that. And then you have the expectation, and then you can determine, is there a consequence associated with that, whatever it might be. Yeah. Because like you said, we can't make someone say, okay, be open-minded, read the room, and do all 10 of these amazing communication traits. Right.
But if we begin to apply those to ourselves, we just become better. Right. And happier in that whole sentence we keep using of learning how to live right and well. I just think that's obviously the goal behind Proverbs. So.
Yep. No, that's great. The second part of their question, how do we have necessary conversations with the fools?
Yeah, so buy the book. Buy the book. It's going to help. I would recommend some books, honestly, because this has been an area that I've always struggled with too. Yeah. And I think that's natural for us. We don't want to have hard conversations. It's not pleasant, but often in our worlds, we have to figure out how to have those conversations. Yep. And you're going to, if you're not already a parent, you're going to have hard conversations. So the earlier you can get used to it, get as comfortable as you can be with it, then, there you go. There's 2 books that I pulled from my shelf, because there's lots of books on how to do this, and some of them I just think are not helpful for me. Because a lot of times the advice is, oh, you got to sandwich the hard thing in between 2 nice things. Right. It's like, say a nice thing that you don't mean, and then say the hard thing that you're really trying to say, and then say another nice thing to soften the blow, because we're Americans. That's fine. If that works for you, do you, boo. Right. But But there's other ways to get at it. So there's a couple of them. One is called where am I? Difficult Conversations. This is a decent book. It's not written necessarily from a Christian perspective, but it's classic. It's been around for a long time, and their whole byline is how to discuss what matters most. I've highlighted a ton in here, and not everything in here is magical gold, but there's some really good components in here of just how to have those more difficult conversations, and so conversations with maybe somebody in your world that you've identified as a fool.
Yep.
What does that look like to have the, hey, I love you, but I need you to do this by this time, or, we're probably going to be in some situations. The one that might be more important is this by Douglas Stone and Sheila Heen. It's called Thanks for the Feedback. This isn't how you have difficult conversations with other people. It's how you receive difficult conversations from other people.
That's interesting.
Because, and I'm not suggesting you're the fool, but I have a really hard time with criticism. I don't know that any of us do great, but no, but I'm particularly, I have all the hotbed stuff that happens here. I lawyer up immediately. I begin to feel my blood pressure rise, and it's like, why?
Yeah.
Especially if that person has my best interest at heart. So I'm trying to figure out how to be a better receiver of difficult conversations, and I'd like to tell you that I'm way better than I was.
Yeah.
But I was really bad before, and now I'm just partly bad. So that Thanks for the Feedback might be a better place to start, just for you, whoever's asking this, to figure it out in you. And my guess in that is that you'll figure out how to have that with others, because you know how you want to be.
Yep. Yeah, I think it goes back to, what we were just talking about of how do you make someone have a better conversation is you can't.
Yeah.
But you can be prepared going into that conversation. And I think it goes back to those 10 principles again of argument is not the goal.
Right.
The number of times where before I worked in ministry, working in the business world, where people were like, okay, we're going to go into this meeting and we're going to have an argument.
Yeah.
Well,
no.
Why is that the expectation?
Why set it up that way?
Like, okay, well now we are going to argue because
bring it on.
That's the goal apparently of the argument. Right. So argument's not the goal.
Yeah.
We're measured. We're open-minded. We're reading when you enter into that conversation in that way, like the number of times I have had difficult conversations where you kind of have the argument in your head going into where it's like, oh, I'm going to say this.
I'm really good at that, by the way.
This is what they're going to say. I know they're going to say this. And then you say the first thing and their response is usually, oh, yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, no, I had the whole argument.
Yeah, we can't do that.
There's like 20 more minutes of conversation that I have to have.
Man, is that common to everybody, you think, that where you're having that fake dialogue in the car when you're driving someone, you've got that person set up and you're just having it? That's everybody, right?
I think so. I think to some extent we just...
I would be fascinated if we get any feedback from this. Like, you tell us if that's a thing you do, if that's just continual.
Yeah, I have inner monologue of arguments with people.
It's so unhealthy. For me, I'm talking about me, not you or you, but
it absolutely is.
I get myself all worked up on something that's not even real.
You begin to perceive things that aren't there because you're still preparing for the conversation and it hasn't happened yet. And they say things that are like, oh, I know they're thinking this.
Yeah.
And they're not.
And in my best moments, I can look at that objectively and be like, man, how arrogant and selfish of me is that to assume that they're going to be the worst of themselves.
Right.
When obviously I'm the best of myself.
Right.
It's so goofy, and yet I don't stop doing it. I'm still culpable of that regularly, and I have to fight myself back from.
Yeah.
That's weird. I'm glad we had that discussion.
Me too. Yeah, I think it's helpful. How do you have the necessary conversation with a fool? I think it's helpful to paint yourself that you are probably the fool too.
Sometimes.
Entering into that conversation where it's like, okay, there are things that I've probably done. There's things that I can own up to. I go back to the passage of Jesus where we're taught humility to count others as more significant than ourselves.
Yeah.
And so in that conversation, sometimes people have done things that are objectively foolish, and we have the responsibility to have that conversation with that person and say, hey, this is something we need to address.
Yeah.
And I can approach that in humility, knowing that I have messed up and I will mess up.
Sure. And
that can at least temper some of the internal argument that happens before I even have that conversation. So
I think some of the cautionary on this too is we always identify anybody who disagrees with us as the fool.
Yes.
Like, oh, that guy's a fool. But that's not what the Bible means when it talks about the fool. And even that book from Henry Cloud, Necessary Endings, it does a good job describing this concept of the fool, and it's that person that will be defensive, will deflect, will blame you instead. So there is a litany of components to that person. It's not just a person that disagrees with you, or a person who maybe made a mistake or something like that. That doesn't make them the fool. They're the person that, and that's why he lands on don't use words. Right. Because if you try to, hey, explain, this is why, and they're gonna just, well, that wasn't my fault. That was Bob, and Bob didn't do. And then if you would have given me better, so there's just this defensiveness. You're not gonna get anywhere. It's gonna end up with a switch track. So there's now another 5 conversations they want to throw into. Well, you never do the. Okay, we can talk about that also, but right now we want to concentrate. So that defining that person is a fool, be cautious with that.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, we're very liberal in our use of fools.
Yeah.
Because to us, like you pointed out in your message, to us, fool doesn't mean exactly what it meant when Solomon wrote.
Right.
You're an idiot.
Yeah, that's a fun one.
For us, it's that's foolish. Everything's foolish that we do is wrong. But
yeah.
Good clarification.
Good.
All right. This question comes in. What would you suggest to a married couple who both people in the married couple avoid conflict and avoid communication because they did not have healthy communication resolution modeled to them by their parents? If they are stuck in a pattern of not communicating, how can they begin to change that pattern? And so we talked about this as staff this morning. We've talked about it. Julie and I talked about it with our life group, of that learned behavior of communication for the family, where that just becomes ingrained in what you do, and you can acknowledge it, and it's still a part of your life 20 years later, 30 years later, 40 years later, however long it might be. How do you break out of that pattern of poor communication that was learned in your family?
Yeah, great question. So I don't know who's asking this, but with all sarcasm aside, I would love to talk more about maybe some specifics with you. Yeah. If this is an issue that's ongoing and more than just sort of an intellectual curiosity kind of thing, which is cool too. So shoot me an email or whatever, because I would love to unpack this a little more, because what I'm going to say next might come across as, just email me. I'm a little concerned in the question, again, unless it's an intellectual, like we're just kind of curious, because if you've identified that you have unhealthy models, then there's no reason to stay stuck in the model that's you've identified as unhealthy. So in the question, it identifies that, hey, we had these bad models and now we just keep doing the same thing. Right. Oh, what was us? Well, no, because if you've identified those as unhealthy models and you saw that, I get that. Right. So then don't do that. Do different. Right. Which is super, that's why I say, please email me, like, because that's such a...
Right, it can come across as callous.
Callous and baseline, like, well, okay, but we don't know how to do that. Okay, cool. We can certainly come up with some better tools, better tricks, better tips. But I think more often than not, couples that are stuck in non-communicative relationship, they may not recognize it's built on unhealthy parent model patterns. They just think that that's because their spouse is a horrible, or they're horrible, or, this is just, or this is normal.
Right, this is what marriage is.
We just don't talk about these things because when we do, we fight, so we don't bring them up. Right. And that's also super unhealthy.
A good marriage is where you never fight, you never disagree.
Oh, man. And I like to joke with Rick about the spirited conversation, what do you call that, idiom for fighting. But no, I mean, like Les and Leslie Parrott, a couple of Christian researchers, therapists, counselors, professors at it. I think it's Pacific University, whatever. Written a number of books, and one of the books they write is called Fight Night. And they put on these seminars where they teach you how to fight, which I think is an amazing way to just not beat around the bush, if we're using one of those principles of fighting can be a good thing, but there are some ground rules to it. Right. So, and what that looks like of not bringing up stuff in the past, and then how we, what words we use in our present, and how we stay on a single track and not switch tracks. So, so to the question, I'd say if you feel like there's issues that you never talk about because you don't know why, you just can't talk about them. Well, I don't know why we just can't talk about these things. Yeah. I would suggest finding someone that you can talk to help you get some perspective on how to do that. Right. As a married couple, you should and can talk about any issue under the sun. One of the things that we do, and I think a lot of you have heard, Emily and I are leading these funner marriage retreats where we know funner is not a word, but we think marriage should be and can be. So what you're doing in your marriage already is good stuff. And if we just a few assessments and a couple of minor tweaks, like it could be even funner. So that's kind of the thing. Well, one of the things that happens in those assessments that they see there's a section that are called hot topic issues.
Yep.
And so it's the 5 things that when these topics come up will probably bring controversy to you for whatever reason. And it's stuff like kids or money or sex or in-law relationships. There's a whole bucket of options that they self-identify what those are. Just knowing those, that's the win.
Yep.
Because it's like, okay, well, if that issue of finances is going to come up because now I'm looking at the checkbook and we're overdrawn again, and I know that's a hot topic issue for whatever reason, I can approach that a little more sensitively, read the room. I can walk into that a little more softly.
Yep.
And maybe the best time to do that is not when my spouse gets right home from work and I start it with, so we're overdrawn again. But maybe there's but other topics that are not hot topic issues that are easy for us to talk about, maybe I can hit them up right when they get home from work. Be like, well, the trash guy missed us again. I'm like, that guy. I mean, is that making sense? So it's a long answer because I don't know how to answer that question definitively. Other than, on one hand, if you're not sure why you can't talk about these things, I'd say meet with someone. Any of us as pastoral staff would love to sit down with you and just help you get past that stuck point. Or we've got lists of professional therapist counselors. There's probably some good books out there, but I think probably a neutral third person is going to be the most helpful hit.
Right.
But if you recognize that it's rooted in a model you've seen, then don't use that as an excuse.
Right.
And just let's do different than what you've seen. So.
Yeah, well, I think to share a little bit of Julie and I's story, I think knowing the issue and acknowledging that to each other.
Yeah,
it's different to acknowledge it here and say, if it's one spouse saying like, hey, I think I see unhealthy patterns, but acknowledging that with your spouse and saying, this seems like an issue. Is it an issue for you? Yeah. It is an issue for me. So at least now that's out there. But for Julie and I, like when Julie and I started dating in high school, dated all through college, got married right after college. So very formative years. We spent a lot of time together, a lot of times with our families. And very quickly when we got married, realized, okay, I like arguing.
Oh.
Julie does not like arguing.
Okay.
So I just dominate.
Yeah, sure.
The conversation, dominate with my opinion. That's just because that's what she was raised with. My parents don't really argue in front of us. They don't disagree. So Julie never had a model that she could observe of this is how families deal with disagreement.
Yeah.
Whereas in my family, which is a big family, we never stop arguing. So that was just normal for me.
Yeah.
Arguing was normal.
Yeah.
And so Julie and I were able to acknowledge that and say, hey, it seems like you never want to disagree. And she can come back to me and it seems like you only want to disagree.
Yeah, that's great.
And we can acknowledge that and talk through that.
That's great communication.
Yeah. And just getting that out there and starting that process of, okay, we acknowledge the problem, but just because the problem's there isn't an excuse to say, well, it's just the way it is.
Yeah.
I'm just going to argue.
Right.
So
we've had these unhealthy models.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that would really apply like anywhere in life, not just communication, but, we have these unhealthy models of, addiction issues or, unhealthy lifestyle issues or, whatever it might be, abuse issues.
Yep.
We're just going to perpetuate it.
Right.
And nobody would be like, oh, that's okay.
Right. That's normal.
Yeah. No, it can be healthier. It can be funner.
Right. Yeah. So that's great. So this is a great first step. Yeah. I think following up, getting a neutral third party or just continuing the conversation is the best way to bring change.
Yeah. I like it.
So
good.
Cool.
I hope that's helpful to whoever asked that question.
Yes. Yeah. Last question.
Okay.
Which this might feed into a little bit of what we just talked about. If you are prone to communicate passionately rather than calmly passionately, how do you go about calming yourself and not letting emotions take over the conversation?
Yeah, so I'm a passionate guy. I get myself all whipped up.
Yep.
And so that's easy for me. And I don't want to downplay the role of emotions in the conversation because I do want us to be authentic to who we are. So for me to come across as a, stoic Frankenstein, I'm going to spend all my energy on modifying my facial features and not engaging in the conversation.
Yep.
So laying that as a base, I think there has to be some room for that. But within that, it doesn't give me license to be a jerk. It doesn't give me license to bulldoze. It doesn't. So I got to be mindful of those things.
Right.
And hopefully, depending on who I'm speaking with, they can help me.
Yep.
So my wife, she can clearly say, hey, Chris, let me finish. Oh, okay, sorry. Got so excited. So that's helpful. But, in other environments where maybe they don't know me, I have to be a little more mindful of what I'm doing in that. If we just want to look for an incredibly practical side of a piece of advice, I guess, is when the word passionate comes up, there's a real wide spectrum of what that might mean.
Yep.
And so if that means, and this is just me talking about me again, sometimes my defenses start to go up. I feel my blood pressure rise. I don't know why I'm getting frustrated right now in this conversation about probably a thing that's not that important, probably doesn't match the need for but for whatever weird reason, I'm feeling personally threatened. Then an hour from now, I could probably rationally work out of that and realize what a goofball I'm being. But in that moment, I just feel my blood pressure rising. I'm getting frustrated. I'm starting to lose focus on what we're really talking about because I just want to. So real easy tips. There are a couple of, we use this in counseling all over the place. One's called box breathing. If you've heard of box breathing, you take a breath 4 seconds in, so you breathe in for 4, you hold for 4, you breathe out for 4. You hold for 4. It sounds so dumb and maybe sounds a little, can we say sissy on this podcast? It sounds maybe sissy. So here's the cool part. If you're a dude listening to this, this came out of Navy SEAL training. You cannot get more manly.
It's not sissy at all.
Than Navy SEAL training. And it actually is a component that these guys use before they go into some of their most intense situations, because if they're in there with the emotions high and running, mistakes get made. And so they learn box breathing early on so that they can control that, not only in those, let's say, aggressive situations, but you just think in terms of having to swim long distances, some of the stuff that they do. So Navy SEALs, so that's kind of a cool component, and it's there's a psychological and physiological design behind that to bring your parasympathetic and your sympathetic nervous systems, which I don't even know what that means, but it sounds cool, together and get them matching. And so sometimes when you feel that, man, I'm getting frustrated, face turning red, heart rate is going up, you're just feeling that sense of, and you don't know why, like, what am I? That's your nervous system's kind of going out of whack. Box breathing can bring them back in. Okay. And then maybe continue on to that conversation. Sometime later, you might revisit why you felt threatened or but sometimes in the moment, you just can't do that. So that's a really simple trick. And then the other one is they call it grounding techniques. Grounding technique is, and it's used heavily in the world of panic attacks. It's a really helpful tool, but I think it could be helpful if you're, again, sensing that, whatever emotion driving up. And that is usually 3 things you can smell, 3 things you can see, 3 things you can touch in the room right now. Sure. So just that 2 minutes it takes to do that, that can help bring back to reality and center you back down. Grounding is what it's called. Okay. On the other side, if it's not that extreme, it's just like, how do I communicate with a little less tricks like using I language instead of you? In other words, like you said, hey, I think I heard you say. That's just different. That helps keep the emotion back here and not shoving out there. And then the idea of not using extreme words like never or always. Well, you never let me finish. Well, that's not true. It just can't be a true statement. Words like never and always can't be true statements. So there's probably a couple things that help mitigate some of the passion. What do you think? What am I missing? There's probably more to that.
Yeah, I think so for me, as someone that also communicates passionately, we can talk about literally anything and I will communicate passionately. I always tell the story to communicate this. My brother and I lived together in college as roommates with 2 other guys for my freshman year, his junior year. And the story I always use, again, grew up in a big family. We're always arguing. It's just how you communicate. It's just argue, which again, not condoning, just observing a fact of big families. And so we're living together. It's probably 2 a.m, and me and my brother are wide awake arguing about whether it's better to use shampoo and then conditioner or use a 2-in-1 shampoo conditioner.
Seems
I,
important.
of course, advocated for the shampoo and then conditioner because, of course, that's right.
Obviously.
We were literally and this is just how big families argue, like no animosity towards each other. It's just this is the thing that matters right now in this moment. Yeah. Arguing and arguing and arguing. And our roommate finally woke up and was like, will you please stop? It's 2 a.m. Yeah. Please shut up.
Yeah.
And so learning that you really can just stop.
Yeah.
You can walk away from an argument. And that was something hard in marriage when Julie and I were first married, was walking away from an argument to me felt like I'm dismissing the issue, that I'm I'm being unbiblical because I'm letting the sun go down in my anger.
Oh, wow, yeah.
That's the verse that's typically used, where it's like, we have to do this argument. We have to finish this conversation tonight, because if we don't, I'm failing as
not listening to Jesus somehow.
Husband.
Yeah.
But understanding that it really is okay, and probably better in most situations, to say, hey, I love that we're having the conversation. I'm not trying to dismiss it. I do think I need time to just process, to just let my emotions not get the better of me, because I feel them starting to get the better of me, and I don't want to take things out on you. So if we can we pause and come back in an hour or tomorrow or whatever it might be, and understanding that's really okay. It's not dismissive. You're not dismissing the person. You're not dismissing the issue. You're trying to protect the person because you recognize that you tend to be emotional. You might let your emotions get the better of you, and you don't want to take that out on that person, while again recognizing, like you said, emotions are important. Emotions are going to be a part of every conversation that you have. That's a good thing. And understanding when it can be abused is good too.
I think I like what you're saying there, and I think that's a definite application of that verse, to not let your sun go down on your anger, because you're not.
Right.
You're saying we're gonna work this out, baby. I love you so much. We're in this, like this. We're gonna figure this out. Tonight's not a good time to do that.
Right.
I'm tired. You're tired. Whatever.
Right.
I think the misapplication, or the danger of not listening to that kind of a verse, is I'm angry at you, but I'm not going to tell you that I'm angry at you.
Right.
I'm just going to allow Satan to develop this bitterness in me and have a foothold. So now our relationship is tweaked, which is going to make my relationship with God tweaked. So that's more what I think Jesus is saying there.
Right.
Not that you have to solve it all before, which is easier in the summer than in the winter, because it goes down at like 4 p.m. So.
Right. Well, and I think it can bring up in that conversation, I'm mad, and I really shouldn't be mad. So I can deal with my anger and still have the issue be unresolved. Right. Because now I'm angry, and I have no reason or right to be angry. I'm taking that out. That now needs to be addressed in the moment, and I need to apologize. I need to repent of that, ask for forgiveness.
And probably has less to do with the other person and more to do with what's wrong in me, where I still need Jesus to shave off some stuff in me.
Right. Yeah. So it's okay to take a break. It really is.
And healthy, very healthy.
Cool. Well, that's all the questions we have.
Cool.
Anything on your end that you're leaving unsaid?
You're
not communicating?
Probably. I don't know. I mean, what do you say when you're how to communicate from Proverbs? Well, next month we'll read it again, and so you'll pull out 10 more points, and it's kind of cool. So.
Yeah. Well, the last thing I'll say is we had a great conversation in life group about how it's so cool that God gives us these amazing principles for communication so that we can communicate who he is. Like, that's so cool. That all of those principles that we get from Proverbs can be built and used in our day-to-day relationships to communicate, like, hey, this is what Jesus is doing in my life. What's Jesus doing in your life? Sure. He's not doing anything.
Yeah, he is.
He's doing something.
Yeah, he is. Let's find it.
He's doing something.
Hey, what life group are you part of?
I'm a part of the La Victor.
Oh,
is that how they pronounce their last name?
Yeah, no, you got it. No, he's Brad. Yeah, no, that's one of my favorite life groups.
It was one of those names that I read the first time, and I was like,
La Victor,
La Victoria.
Yeah, I think it's French. French, maybe Italian. I don't know.
Yeah, but it's great.
It's one of my favorite life groups. I have a lot of favorite life groups. La Victor, Jarvis, two of my favorite top life groups that I love. And if you're looking for a life group, they also meet on Sunday afternoons.
They do.
So, we got a couple on Sundays. But we have life groups on other days too. So if you're not in one.
But those are not Chris's favorite.
No, some of those are my favorite life group.
Well, they're not going to be mentioned. So.
Well,
I'm just sensing it.
If they come up in the podcast, I'll mention it. If they ask a question to the podcast,
then they can be.
We'll mention them. Yeah, I'm just saying.
It works.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for your time.
Man. Yeah, sure.
Thanks for submitting questions. Keep all the good social media stuff rolling. Keep the conversation going. Like Chris said, let us know. Continue the conversation. Ask questions. We love doing it. It's a blast.
Yeah.
So
dig it.
Awesome. Well, we'll keep reading through Proverbs through February, and we will see you all next week.